Good morning. Welcome to the Light on Suitability podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Comeau. Joseph Haytas is with us, author of 36 Strategies of Suitability. We're talking about his book. We're on strategy 13, writing the Letter of Remorse. I have also Dean Laurellis with us from Lighthouse 9 Consulting. Before I forget, because I always forget, I'd like to lead with a little bit on what Dean offers through his programs, and then we can get started on Letter of Remorse, if that's okay with you, Joe.
Excuse me?
If that's okay with you, because what happens is at the end of the meeting.
No. Hey, it's your show. Go for it. No. And Dean needs to be, everybody needs to know who he is and what he does. Absolutely. So,
take it away, Joe. Take it away, Dean.
Okay. Lighthouse 9 Consulting, we have a number of correspondence courses that we offer. These courses are directed towards the crimes. So whether they're PC 290 related, sex offenses, murders, gang offenses, we have programs to address these, domestic violence. When we run the programs, they're usually a set curriculum, and you are assigned a counselor. So you'll work with a professional who will provide feedback, critique, and grade your assignments. Once they complete the assignments, we provide a letter and a certificate addressed to the board. These are of completion, so that they can show the board that they've done the work. We also have another number of other services we provide. We do transcript reviews from the board hearings. We do CRA reviews. We help put together board packets, and just being able to help people prepare for the board. We have another program that we've been doing for a little while that we don't advertise as much. It's usually word of mouth. It's called the Total Package, and it involves all of our services that apply to the client. And we have them call us once a week for 45-minute sessions, and we do board preparation. And with that program in specific, we have an 88% success rate of guys being found suitable when they go to the board. So that's been very productive. Plus, like I said, that includes all of our services that apply. So whatever programs we have that they need, that's included in that. And we do that for usually about 6 months. So they'll call every week for 6 months, and we'll get them set up for board. But right now it's like we're offering programs. We are in every prison in California. So we have a lot of clients in California, constant mail coming in. We're also in 19 states now across the country. So there's other states that we're working with, and it's kind of funny because we've had we had a call from Utah, and I didn't know how did they hear about us in Utah, Davis County, Utah, and we were asked if we could help them prepare for the board. So we had to research the Utah's process. Can we even be of service? And what we discovered was that Utah, though they have a different process, they're looking for the same thing. They're looking for the change. They're looking for coping skills and, insight, the same stuff that California does. So we were able to help out. And matter of fact, with that client in specific, we're still, working with them. But Lighthouses, we've been around since 2018 and continue to grow. Keeps us busy, which is a good thing. So we go into Pleasant Valley State Prison. We go in person and run programs in there. So that's Pleasant Valley is one of those prisons that's underserved because of the location. There isn't a whole lot in the area, so it's the guys are always happy to see us when we go in, and it's just the work itself is very rewarding when you see the people, the light go on and they start applying what they're learning, and you see the changes in their lives. And we've had a couple at Pleasant Valley who've gone to the board and been found suitable. So it's really pretty cool. But in a nutshell, that's what we do.
That's phenomenal. Great. Yeah. Although Avenal across the street from Coalinga has programs wherever, left and right. Nobody's left without programs there. So I don't think people want to deal with some of the yards, I guess, maybe at Pleasant Valley, because it's more level. Maybe it's harder to, I don't know. Not sure why they wouldn't go over there.
We have we go into a non-designated yard. We also go into a GP yard. They're both level 3s. But from what I was told, this week was that all level 3s in the state are going to be turned to non-designated yards. So even the GP yards are going to flip them to non-designated. And so this is the word that's going around in the system right now. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. You know, to me, it's creating violence. Why are you going to put?
It's just gonna. Here we go with the wave of violence, like back in the day when we went from SNY to non-designated, and and that's really unfortunate. And I'm not sure if they're well staffed for that problem. But anyway, let's not go down that dark road.
We can talk about that for the next hour at least.
I know.
It's just going to be very. It's going to be very tragic for a while. Okay. So, but you know, they've got to give all these level 4s, 3s a chance, and
you know where their chance starts.
It makes me very concerned for
the chance starts up here and in here. You have to decide. You can't like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So,
however, when these switches happen, there's just all this random violence. So that's saddens me, but I pray for the best. Maybe they've got some sort of magical thing that they're going to do this time that makes it different from the last time that they did this thing. So
sure, I'm with you. I hope so.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, and I'm sure Dean understands what we're talking about. So maybe more acutely than we do. Writing the letter of remorse. Let me know what that means in your book, Joe, because I think it means a couple of different things for everybody.
What does it mean? It means sitting down and getting in touch with yourself and how you feel and writing that letter, you know. There's no real template besides you know, a few things. Actually, what I want to say is I wrote about, excuse me, in my next book, Inside Out. And let me get it and share with you guys. What I think people should do before they write the letter of remorse. You know I should have this. It should come out without referring to any documents. You know, what I always tell the incarcerated people at the hearing, but
it's fine. Yeah, I'm happy we're getting a little sneak peek, though.
What's that?
I'm happy to get a sneak peek of your new book.
Oh yeah, well, you don't have to worry about a sneak peek. Just go and get one. It's on Amazon. And so anyways, yeah, I think there's some questions you have to ask yourself before you write. And you know, you need to ask yourself if about your responsibility. How are you responsible? What were the feelings that you had immediately after the crime? Did you feel guilt? Did you feel any shame? Then ask yourself, you know, what does remorse mean to you? It's a personal question. And do you feel remorse? And how remorseful are you? You know, and a big thing too is, when did you start to feel remorse? Sometimes people start really early in the process, like, and they say they don't want to, they didn't go to a trial, they pled because they didn't want to have the victim or the victim's family on the stand. So that's an early sign of remorse. And hopefully that remorse, whenever it starts, leads to taking responsibility and being accountable, and then going to change. You know, it's like a step. I mean, there's steps for everything, you know. What do they call it? Obsession, compulsion, whatever. But this one is, you know, remorse, responsibility, accountability, and addressing those things. So now, other things you should do is when you sit down to write the letter, then after you've done that, express your feelings about the crime, and only until, don't do it until you've explored and thought deeply about the crime and its impact, of course, and who it harmed, and not just the direct victims, but of course the indirect victims, the family, the friends, co-workers, and then on into the community, the neighbors in the area or whatever. Think about how it affected the local community, if appropriate, the first responders, the police, on and on into the medical and legal sectors. And put yourself, I think this is one of the most important things you can do, is to put yourself in the shoes of the victim and look at it from the victim's point of view, and try to feel, if you're serious about this process, you got to try to feel how the victim felt, like how the victim felt before the crime and during the crime, and if appropriate, after the crime. I think that's the most important thing about remorse is putting yourself in the victim's shoes and looking at the crime from the victim's point of view. And when you're sitting there putting yourself in the victim's shoes, think about how it affected them, emotionally, psychologically, just the terror that they were feeling at the time, if you think they were feeling terror, and not knowing what's going to happen to them, and maybe not knowing the future, whatever. But so how does that make you feel? And then express that in your letter. Some people aren't very they don't have a big I find this especially in Spanish speaking incarcerated people, where they don't have a big vocabulary. So they say, I felt bad, but they have to explore that, and why did they feel bad, so it's all about going in and really picking things apart, and so that you can craft a letter of remorse that reflects your feelings, but at the same time is sensitive to the victim's feelings. You can't go in there and ask for forgiveness. That's one thing you should never do, because that's up to the victim, and it's totally voluntary. You don't want to ever ask for forgiveness. That's up to them. They don't owe you a damn thing. And also, other things not to do would be, let's see, don't say things, this is very insensitive, I know how you must feel. No. Sorry, no, don't say that. And don't go in and list all your participation in self-help groups. Don't say, yeah, I took Lighthouse 9. No, that's for another time, in another place, but not to the victim. Okay. So, even if that helped a lot, still, and Dean's a great guy, but don't say that in the letter. Okay.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. And one thing to remember too is that the victim's probably not going to get the letter. So this letter actually is more for you than it is for the victim. I think it has a potential of being extremely therapeutic, depending on how serious the writer takes it. So the writer needs to get very serious about this, because it's more if I can call the perpetrator, the guilty party, the person who did it actually did it, it's more for you. It's more for you, bro, than it is for the victim, because the victim may never read it. But that's okay, because you want to feel what the victim felt as much as possible. Mm-hmm. So that's so those are things to say and things not to say in a letter. And it all starts with self-exploration.
I like that, Joe. I'm starting to wonder if you read my curriculum before you came on today.
I did not.
No, I know. But no, it's spot on what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And, and just to add to it, there's the part, when the self-exploration, I think that's great, because a person needs to understand where they're at before they put things on paper. And a lot of times guys will ask me, how do I do this? How do I start? And I tell them, I said, well, when you're sitting in your cell and pretend that person is sitting across from you, what do you want to say? What do you want to tell them? And you don't go into specifics into the crime, because you don't want to reopen old wounds. And like you said, you don't ask for forgiveness. And one thing that we tell them is that you've taken enough from this family. You don't have the right to ask them for one more thing. So you do not ask for forgiveness. And also we tell them to use Mr. So-and-so or the victim's full name rather than just their first name. Because unless if it's a biological family member, then that's something a little different. But when it's somebody that they don't know, gang related or whatever, because it's like whoever, you lost the intimate privilege of being able to call that person by their first name only when you offended against them. So
thank you. That's a great point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. From this point forward, they are Mr. or Mrs. or they use their full name. And I've had some guys who've kicked up some dirt about that. I even had one guy who said, I walked around for 3 days after you told me that because I was mad at you. And I said, well, did you get over it? And he goes, well, I realized you were right. And I said, well, yeah, okay, well, I'm glad you're past it. Now this is how we do it. But, there's certain language that, like you said, I forget the word you said, felt bad. I think you said with the lack of the vocabulary. Another word that I come across is upset. I know upset has so many different meanings. Break it down, be specific, paint the picture with the language. But sometimes we get guys who, what I call grandiose. I know I've scarred your soul forever. Okay, first off, have you ever seen a soul? Did you ever touch a soul? Do you even know what a soul looks like? Well, no, then stop talking like that because you have no idea. And like you said, there's, I understand what you're going through. No, you don't. Well, I went through the same thing. This happened to me. Yeah, but you're a different person. You have a different tolerance level. It's not the same. But I think what I like to, you talked about empathy, putting yourself in their shoes. In our Navigator program, we have an assignment called Through Their Eyes, where they write through the eyes of the victim as if the crime was happening to them. And so a lot of guys, they say, well, I don't know what do you think they went through? What do you think was going on in their minds? That's what we want you to write, because we want them to be able to find some way to relate, to understand, even if it's a little bit, get a working knowledge of what this person went through, even though you will never understand exactly what they went through. But, this helps gain some insight into that, and then with the remorse letters, a lot of times they're like, well, who do I write them to? Well, you have your primary victim, you have your secondary victims, which are the family members, and then the tertiary, which is the community. First responders, judicial system, medical workers, and, be able to identify the difference in the victims and potential harms that you've caused them, just to have the insight to understand what you may have caused. And other things, a lot of guys, they'll assume that they've done something. I've ruined your life forever. I've done this. No, if you don't know, use the word may have. I may have done this. I may have done that. Unless you know for a fact that you've done something, that this person had to seek mental health professional, help afterwards, then okay, that for a fact. But don't assume, because I think the last thing that a lot of guys want is for the victim at the board hearing to stand up and say, you didn't ruin my life forever. You know, you're not that strong. You don't have that power over me. So don't assume that you do, you know, when the victim speak at the hearing. So it's like being careful as to what they're saying. Don't, you know, express your remorse. And, you know, another word that I have an issue with is apologize. Some guys say, I want to apologize. And I think maybe I take it a little further than most with that word. Apologize comes from the Latin apologesis, which means to defend orally. So are you defending orally when you do, you know, so I'm so, you know, express your sorrow, your pain, your hurt for what you've done in a way that's, you know, appropriate. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you went right into, which is exactly where we are. I think, and I agree with you. There's no template for this. It's different for each person, but I think that people have to be very careful in how they write these letters, and to hit on the valid. And when you look at it, it's a remorse letter. Express your remorse. That's what the purpose of the letter is. And don't go into a long list of self-help programming. I agree with that, you know, because nobody cares. Yeah. So it takes some time. I've had some guys who've really had to write these things over and over again. And they'll ask you, well, what if I have more than one victim? Well, then one for each victim, one for their family members, and, you know, just one for the community. You might go in there with half a dozen, you know, remorse letters, but that's okay, because you'd rather have it and not need it rather than need it and not have it. So, you know, and I've had some guys who use the same one for like all their victims. And it's like, dude, you're showing me you're lazy is what you're showing me, that you don't have the concern. And believe me, the commissioners are going to look at it the same way. This guy's just, you know, he replicated the same letter for every victim. It's laziness. Does he even have remorse at this point? You know, if he's going to do this. So yeah, that's our take on it. That's the way we like to approach it.
Very good. Wow.
Fewer letters. Leave out the community, leave out the police department, the district attorney, and everybody else who signed up for the job. You don't need to apologize to us, to them, the community. Okay, it's fine. But if your loved one is too lazy to write personalized letters to each of the main victims, then just pick the primary, a couple of secondaries, and leave people out so you can talk personally about the harm caused, because the harm caused to one might not be the same harm caused to the other. You can look to, you know, sentencing transcripts, if they've showed up over the years, letters they may have written, just the nature of the crime itself you could talk about, your loved one could talk about in that letter. And then I think as far as the word apology, it's in the 10th step, you know. Apologize when wrong, promptly apologize. So I don't know if they take such a pedantic, you know, expression of the word apology, but I don't know. I'm sorry. You know, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you were hurt by my actions. Don't say that. That would be really awful to say that. And a couple other things. Remorse is specifically mentioned in Title 15. What is it in Title 15? It's an expression of the crime in such a manner that you convey to the panel that you appreciate the nature and magnitude of the offense itself. So remorse is, and I believe this is in Joe's book, remorse is about taking responsibility, but not, I take responsibility. It's a way for the panel to assess the level of responsibility, and the level of responsibility merges into remorse when it conveys something like nature and magnitude. So when someone would sit there and feel awful when you're hearing about the crime, it's so bizarre, but that's actually a good thing. It means that you've really you are accountable for your actions, instead of just a baseline repetition, or should I just say yes and agree to the record? I'm like, no, because then you don't meet the Title 15 factor for the one suitability factor, because remorse is a factor of suitability, not a factor of unsuitability, meaning it's not in the unsuitability category as lack of remorse. And I know that's sort of a a distinction that doesn't seem like it matters, but it does, because it should, because it creates a mitigating effect. At a minimum, it's a mitigator instead of being used as an aggravator. And it's like in I think Joe said that getting, finally aligning with the truth of what happened, and also who you were when it happened. And I tend to steer away from this too in the letter. If I see after I am sorry that I murdered your loved one in the following ways, I don't love their letter. And I specifically say that in my instructions. And, I prefer it to be, if it's an I know that I hurt you in the following manner, but it's not, well, I was under the influence and I was this and I was that. So those explanations for the crime, they belong somewhere. And I tell them, put it in your relapse prevention plan, but it shouldn't belong in the letter of apology, is what I call it, versus a remorse statement, which is in steps 8 and 9 on how you make a living amends to victims that you can't directly make amends to. And so I have that distinction there for them, because I like to, you want to showcase your stuff, fine. I'm fine with it. Showcase it. But you can also showcase insight in your relapse prevention plan in terms of being able to identify triggers, which, how do you identify triggers, which is go through. My new one now is in step 4, instead of saying character defects, because step 6, I'm sorry, says character defects, but step 4 says you take personal stock of what's on your shelves, meaning a moral inventory of everything, good, bad, and ugly. But when it comes to step 6, I'm thinking those are more like character defenses, to be honest, because that's really what they are. They're used as your ego uses them to protect you in some way. It's usually about fear of some nature, but nature and magnitude. So what they did, how serious was it, and the full scope of harm should become the backbone of that letter if you're going to do it as a remorse statement. That's why I think the word remorse is confusing, and I separate it, because remorse is taught by 12 steps as amends. And how do you make amends? You make amends by doing these great things, and therefore, ergo, we're right back to putting it into the letter of apology, which is why I sort of separate the two, keep them mutually exclusive. It's confusing for the majority of my clients, but the ones that, the 12.9s and the college educated guys, I always get them a letter of apology and a remorse statement if they want to showcase offender change, because that's really what it's about. It's about offender change. At the time of the crime, you're not taking responsibility, obviously, because you left the scene of the crime somehow, or you left some victim hanging, or whatever it was, or you kept it a secret, or you fled, or you did this, or you did that. Some people take deals, not a lot for serious life crimes, because there's not really much to lose by trying to take a gamble, unless there's the DA's offering you something. But typically in murder cases, you're not offered a whole lot. And people end up going to trial and not pleading guilty. And when I see a plea of guilty to a murder case, I'm quite surprised, because I'm like, what was your exposure? And sometimes it is 300 to life or something. So, you get the 25 to life, but sometimes it's not really much different, because they haven't made an offer. And so you go to trial. So I like what Joe said, though. At least I pled guilty. I didn't put everybody through a trial. And that's powerful evidence. Not as powerful as expressing the crime in the way that conveys, how serious it really is to everybody. And when you do that, you can also, you can kind of throw in victim impact. So the formula I use for the letter of apologies for my clients, like, how should I write this? What happened to the victim? Second part is meaning on the life crime, and then the impact of it. and that the awareness is knowing who you're writing this to, also via step 8 as well. And then how did it really impact them? Start from physical stuff. If they got shot in the chest and shot in the leg, and that's some easy stuff where you can personalize that. The pain, the leaving them to die, all this stuff that's awful to talk about. But the structured decision-making framework, it's so important. Remorse is so important. Some of these commissioners say, it's not that important, but I think they're maybe oversimplifying it if they think that, because it's really a way to understand that, remember your old self. The Title 15 says the past mental state, present mental state, past attitude, present attitude. So your attitudes, thinking errors, and patterns can all be demonstrated by that. Understanding who it was who committed the crime. There's no harm in doing that analysis. I just say keep it out of the letter. And that Haytas's, Joe's thing about, he sometimes talks about, it's really the heart, at the heart of it is owning your conduct. He says understanding the impact, and then later being able to convey what's changed. But the remorse also, when the panel asks you, well, what steps do you know? What steps have you worked? What's your favorite step? When did you last work the steps? You can say, I last worked them via step 4, step 5, step 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 via preparing this letter of remorse. Oh, how so? And then you've got a whole, way of talking to them on a deeper level, rather than this surface level, group speak stuff that you bring the clients that are simply only memorizing their way to a board hearing. And I don't know. I think that Joe had some warnings in the book: not writing to get sympathy, don't blame youth, especially don't make the victim an afterthought, don't act like remorse is a feeling, don't perform. And
those are all the things not to do.
Yeah, all the things not to do is what you put in there.
I believe so, yeah. It's in a different part of the book, but yeah.
And like Dean just said, don't bring your, I can't remember what he said. Don't use poetry, just be
grandiose, yeah.
Grandiose, yeah. It's not, and I've had clients write poems because they were very, creative that way. And it can be fine. It just depends. It's really a fine line, some of this stuff. I think that, and these remorse letters can really be messed up, because if it's written wrong and you send it in without sending it to the lawyer, maybe, or if the lawyer can't look at it, you've not followed her instructions, you can mess it up. You can write, leave out facts. You can put some verbiage down that sounds like you're still clinging to like a self-protective defense narrative. You can avoid naming the specific harm, and that's a no-no if you've got a panel that's really looking at your stuff to wanting to grant parole. You can't always fix that at a parole hearing, but the DAs will jump all over it. Writing about yourselves instead of the victim is I just think is a no. And I don't know, so much more.
Yeah, well, I like one thing that Joe had mentioned that I had not considered before when you talked about the self-evaluation, to understand that. But and I think that a person, in order to write a remorse letter, has to be in the state of remorse. They have to have experienced that, know what it's about, because you can't. I mean, if you're writing a remorse letter and you're not remorseful, I mean, you're going to miss so much on this. And a lot of times the way that we measure the remorse, and it's in one of our assignments, is remorse is about words, feelings, and actions. The behaviors. What are your actions? What actions are you taking that show that you are remorseful? Because you can go in there and tell the board, "Hey, I'm remorseful. Here's my letter of remorse." But if you have nothing to show me that your actions can state, yeah, this is what he's living amends. This is what this person is doing. So a lot of times we ask them, what are you doing that shows you're remorseful? And one thing I like to bring up to the guys is that I tell them that the person living across the tier from you, who doesn't really know you, who sees you on a daily basis, should see that you are remorseful by what you did, for what you did, by the way that you're living your life in prison. Are they seeing you go to self-help groups? Are they seeing you educating yourself? Are they seeing you give back to the community? What are you doing? What is it they see? And that's a sign of, living in your remorse, living in your amends. So just something for them to think about and to say, what am I doing? But it's the actions that I think are important. And once a person has been living that lifestyle, living in amends, it becomes the lifestyle. It becomes habit. They give back to their community on a regular basis, whether they're tutoring, spending time with somebody who's going through something, or doing whatever it is they're doing to be pro-social, to show as they say, if offender change, but I think that it's significant that they understand remorse or living in remorse in order to write that letter, because if not, you're not there. You're just not there yet.
Yeah. And I think, like, Joe would say in parts of his book, this letter isn't going to get you paroled.
Mm-hmm.
But I have seen a very well prepared parole packets read the weekend before the hearing week by the commissioner is obviously going to give them a tentative feel that you're somebody who's serious about going home. And yeah, I like that. It's not everything, but it's a very difficult thing to do. Saying I'm sorry is a very difficult thing, period. But writing down I'm sorry and here's why, it's really different. It's really everything in that letter. Everything that you've learned is pretty much in that letter, because when you can be accountable, it also shows to the panel. Now, I'm not talking about guys with complicated cases. I'm just talking 95% or more of the cases are, our clients are guilty for something. And accountability is pretty much everything that it pivots on. I mean, once you, like Joe says, get the mindset that you want to be free and all that, the next is to start taking accountability. And when you can take accountability, the whole world opens up to you, because that's where all the change, the psychic change that's promised in the big book, is going to happen. Because without accountability, you don't have anything to turn over to a higher power to fix for you at all. And if you can't identify the problem, you're not going to find a solution, and you're not going to be able to share it with others, which is the most powerful thing you can do. But anyway, I think that sounds great for now. I loved this. I loved the topic of remorse. I really love most of these topics, to be honest with you. But strategy 14, anything look good for us next week, Joe?
Sure. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't know if I can dig it out real quick.
What is strategy 14?
I think it's everything sort of flows from his book.
Oh, it's about don't reinvent the wheel. It's UFOs and suitability, reverse engineering your way to suitability.
Oh, that's
looking at what other people do and what works and what they did, and then you try to model your rehabilitation after what somebody else did in a certain area. That it's not rocket science. It just follow that template, that model.
Yeah.
And whatever works for you.
Yeah, it's right. You're right, Joe. It doesn't have to be rocket science. I mean, some people are obviously have better communication skills. Like Dean is an excellent communicator. He articulates himself well. And but why is that? Because it's back to repetition is the key to mastery, because he does it. He lives and breathes this for day after day. And if your client is someone that's trying to get to parole, that's what they should do. I mean, they lived and breathed their criminal lifestyle every single day. They know every single guy on the football team. They never know every single gang code or writing or edict there is. You can do this for parole too if you do it every day. Every day you make this your lifestyle, and not well here and there, and then come to the client meeting and say, well, I don't have a good memory. Well, let me test that. I don't know. I'm not sure yet if is that just an excuse.
No.
But anyway, I think that's going to be a fantastic topic, Joe.
Yeah, I like that. There's a lot of guys that we work with, and I always tell them, look, stop splitting hairs, stop making the recovery work more complicated than it needs to be. Stop overthinking things, because it's like you're talking about recreating the wheel. It's what they do, and it's just they'll come to me with questions, and I'm like, why are you asking me that? And some guys, they're college students and they're studying psychology. Well, the prefrontal cortex does this, and what I'm noticing, I'm like, dude, just don't go in the boardroom and do that. Do not. But it's not all that complicated. It's about knowing you. And making the changes. And I like what you're saying about looking at somebody else and it works for them. What they did, it works. You can look at that. Now, maybe everything doesn't apply to you, and that's okay. But if something fits, wear it. If it doesn't, then just disregard it. Because everything isn't for everybody. Everybody's process is a little bit different. But find what works for you. And sometimes having the foundation of looking at somebody else's relapse prevention plan. Okay, I have no idea how to write one, but he's got one. Let me look at it so I can get an idea of how to do this. Look at somebody else's, look at another person's, and see what's there, and then make it work.
But don't cut and paste.
Exactly. No, that you do not. It's got to be for you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I once came to the parole board hearing, and God bless the district attorney for being so kind to me when I was new. But the client had submitted all these documents, and he had just submitted like the handout that was given to him at the class in order to help him prepare. And it was it was a sample. It wasn't just a blank where you fill it in with your stuff. It was a sample. And then he had submitted this, and she passed it to me, because it was in the old days when we used to go in person, and then you'd show the exhibits to the DA and then what you were about to pass over. And she was like, hey, you don't want to put that in there. I'm like,
Yeah.
God bless you, girl, for being a good person. So, all right. Well, I'll see you guys next week.
Okay. Well,
I appreciate
the rest
it.
of your Sunday.
You guys too. Big football fans. I'll see you soon.
Yep. All right.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye.